2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum, and also joining us is fellow PhinManiacs contributor, Ian Berger. He's also a superfan extraordinaire, so say hello, gentlemen.
Hello. Good to be back, Louis.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
And good morning if you happen to be listening in the morning after it's been archived.
Or on the other side of the planet.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. First of all, let me just take a moment to apologize profusely to everyone. The last time we did a show, it was May. And that's really not okay. And I realize that it's not okay. And again, I apologize for everything that happened. But let's just say that this past season was definitely not a season where I wanted to really do much. I didn't want to write. I didn't want to do shows. I didn't want to do anything. I just kind of wanted to wait for the nightmare to end. Like you kind of had this feeling of doom and gloom come over you as soon as training camp was over, because it felt like every single important player that Miami had crashed and burned before the season started. And there was just like, oh, okay, no. Can we just like scrub this season and start over? And technically speaking, I think that's what happened. It seemed like the whole season was just a waste of time, and we can just kind of move on towards 2018 where it really counts again. But this is the Miami Dolphins, and everything seems to count for something, no matter what, even if we don't think it should. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about this evening as we bring back the show for the first time in a very, very long time. So, topics on the docket tonight. They are going to be talking about the 2017 season. We're going to get our emotions out, vent for the final time, and hopefully be able to move on with our lives. Kind of like a group counseling session, I'd say. And after that, we're going to try to assign blame. Who is responsible for what went wrong in 2017? Was it Gase? Was it Cutler? Was it Satan down below and ruining everybody's lives for us? We'll figure that out. And once we get past all that, we're going to talk about the Jarvis Landry situation. Is he indispensable? Is he not? How much should we pay him? Should we even pay him at all? And also the quarterback situation. Is Tannehill the guy? Is it Baker Mayfield? Is it Josh Allen? Because I'm hearing a lot for everything recently. We got a lot to talk about. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So first thing is first, 2017, it was an unmitigated disaster. It was beyond miserable to watch. It was beyond painful. It was everything bad under the sun. And just to watch it and live tweet every single game, I really just wanted to disappear for such a long time. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want to do anything with it. Watching Jay Cutler bounce passes at the feet of his receivers seemingly every game. Like, I would argue that that's worse than Ryan Tannehill's weekly bounce pass at the line of scrimmage, because I would rather that happen because that's more understandable than Cutler bouncing back on his feet and missing every guy that he's supposed to throw to. He had a couple of moments here and there where he actually looked like a good starting quarterback, but certainly not anywhere near Tannehill's level. And that's actually where I find it the funniest thing of all, is that people were actually trying to make the argument that Cutler was an upgrade over Tannehill. Gosh, I really want to know if there are still people out there who still believe that today. It's like, do you really objectively believe that Jay Cutler is still a better quarterback than Tannehill, or have we finally removed that illusion from our brains? 6-10 is the final record with Jay Cutler at quarterback. And I know that Matt Moore got a couple games to start. And honestly, and I'm still going to hold myself to this because I had a lot of people telling me, you were so wrong, Louis. And like, well, at the time, maybe I felt like I was wrong. But ultimately, I still think I was right. I still think Matt Moore would have done a better job than Cutler overall, just because he knows everything and he actually cares. Not to mention he would have saved us $10 million. But that's another story altogether. We'll get to that later. But since we're going to go ahead and it's been such a long time for you, Chad, how about I'm going to give you the first comments. 2017, get your emotions out. Let it all out. Let it flow.
Well, I mean, obviously it was a disappointing season on a lot of respects. I don't know that I could point the blame. I'm in agreement with you guys on Cutler. I never watched a lot of Jay Cutler, but I was just shocked at how bad his mechanics were. He throws a lot off his back foot, and for as strong as an Army has, it's just blatantly obvious his mechanics are terrible. So he's very inconsistent, which showed throughout the season. But that is what it is. With that, probably the biggest gripe I have so far would be two things with Gase, and that is this is the second year in a row. Even though we made the playoffs last year, it's the second year in a row where the first 3 or 4 weeks the team's execution is just horrible. They're making lots of penalties. People are lost and not sure where they go. And so I really have to wonder what the problem is with the if it's in training camp or if he's having trouble instilling his offense or what the deal is. But that's concerning. That I hope they get that corrected, because it's hard to start these seasons with 2 or 3 losses right out of the gate like that and then try to get back in it in the playoffs. They were able to have a run last year, but they've got to get whatever the execution problems are figured out. And I'm hoping that him cleaning house with the assistants is what he's trying to do, is get his assistants on top of getting those players ready to run the game plan, because it clearly was an issue. The first half of the season dramatically was a very, very problematic issue, is just executing things. Secondly is I don't like this personnel thing where, if we're paying Matt Moore to be the backup quarterback, then you should have him be the backup quarterback. And so the moment Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, Matt Moore is not the backup quarterback. And so I look at that and think, why is he even on the roster to begin with then? And that carried over from last year where, what is that guy? Is it Brandon Doughty, the guy in the practice squad that we drafted?
But then we got David Fales in here, so.
Yeah, but my point is with Doughty last year, he was not the number 3 quarterback. What is he even doing on the roster? If he's not your number 3 quarterback, why you even have him on the roster? Because the moment Ryan Tannehill got hurt last year, was it T.J. Yates or somebody? I'm trying to remember who we signed, but we had to immediately go sign a veteran quarterback because Doughty was not the guy that was able to back it up. And then again this year, the moment Rakeem McMillan gets hurt, we've got to go sign a linebacker because we don't have a backup starting middle linebacker. And so I don't know if they just are trying to skip salary cap, but if Mike Hull's not our backup linebacker, what is he doing on the roster again, is what I'm asking. And so I just see this reoccurring theme that the moment somebody gets hurt, you quickly find out the guy we had on the roster wasn't actually a backup. It was somebody else we got to run out and try to sign a free agent immediately. And to me, that screams that there's some personnel issues being made if our 53 players are not the best 53 players that are available, because the moment you've got to go find a different starter out on the open free agent market is very concerning to me on the depth. The only other thing I've been kind of preaching this a little bit on Twitter is, you have limited resources to improve your team every year. You've got the draft and you've got free agency, and you've got to be able to develop players. And it's just depressing if you go down, say, the last 10 years, and you look at our number 1 draft picks. It's just the majority of our number 1 draft picks are just gone. And so, I've been throwing some of the names out like Sean Smith and Vontae Davis, Olivier Vernon, Lamar Miller, even Deion Jordan. And it's the same narrative that I've been seeing on Twitter where suddenly it's, we don't need Jarvis Landry. He's way overpaid for what he's wanting. And we don't need Juwan James. He needs too much money for how good he is. And it's just that reoccurring theme. We didn't need Lamar Miller. He wasn't good enough. We didn't need Olivier Vernon. And I see these players going off, and they're doing much better on other teams. If I were to ask you, Sean Smith, where was his best years at? Somebody would probably say Kansas City. If I say Vontae Davis, where did he have his best career at? It'd probably be maybe the Colts. Ted Ginn Jr., ninth overall pick was he? And he's off, in the playoffs playing for teams. And so I see all these guys exiting that we're drafting, and then we're turning around and we're spending our money on players we didn't draft that other teams decided that they didn't want to keep. And I think that's a huge issue. This just seems to be repeating over and over and over. And so I was making the point that, here we are, we're paying like Mike Pouncey and Cameron Wake, and not that they haven't been great players, but we're paying a 36-year-old defensive end, and we're paying a center who has bad knees, and we're now, or hips, I'm sorry, I meant hips. And then so, we're letting Juwan James go, and it looks like a high risk we're going to let Jarvis Landry go. And I just question, I'm like, are we just going through this repeating cycle where we run all of our high picks off to have them go have better careers with other teams, and we continue just to plug holes through free agency, because you can't improve your team if you run a bunch of guys off and just create a bunch more holes before the offseason even gets underway. And so I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I'm really hopeful this team does get Jarvis Landry back, because if with Juwan James going, which for everything I've read and seen, Juwan James is not going to be back, and which to me means we desperately need another starting tackle then. Because right now it's maybe Jesse Davis, and we've got Laremy Tunsil, of course, but Sam Young's also a free agent. And so we've opened up another hole in a critical position on the offensive line. If Jarvis Landry goes, we're opening up that we're going to really need to get a slot receiver. And so how do you even start to approach drafting a number 2 quarterback, or how do we draft a linebacker when we got to get an offensive tackle as well? And so that's just kind of my gripe, is I feel like we're pushing these players out to their final years on their contracts, like we did with Olivier Vernon and Lamar Miller. And when you push them that far out, like exactly where Jarvis Landry is at, they do become the market. And so the market's going to pay Jarvis Landry just like the market paid Olivier Vernon and just like the market paid Lamar Miller. And is he overpaid compared to a slot receiver? He probably is, but they had the opportunity to get him signed last year, and they chose not to. And so I just think there needs to be a bigger emphasis on developing and keeping our own high draft picks.
All right, Ian, now it's your turn. Do you have any response to that, or do you have your own thoughts you'd like to get out?
So I have my own thoughts, and you guys have made some very, very good points so far. But, our season ultimately ended when Ryan Tannehill's knee got re-injured. And, Adam Gase did what he thought was best by bringing in Jay Cutler. And at the time, you look at Jay Cutler's, history of work, and you think, okay, this guy has had some positives, right? A couple of positive seasons, one that got him deep into the playoffs. And then he's had some not so good seasons where, they basically kicked him out of Chicago because he had a couple of bad seasons in a row. But you wanted to give him a chance because you felt, okay, Adam Gase, he has this relationship with Cutler already. Adam Gase is, as everyone had called him, and I don't know if he still has the title, but he was the quarterback whisperer. And you've got all these positives. So I was kind of on that the Jay Cutler Kool-Aid train, I guess you can say, because I thought this guy, all he'd have to do is you plug him into the system that he's familiar with, and he's going to run with it, right? So I really look at this season as a tale of 4 different 4 seasons. So it's a season of 4 seasons, I guess you could say, because you look at, and I'm going to take you all the way back to the preseason. I know the preseason doesn't mean a lot, but you look at the game that Jay Cutler played, and if you remember the game, I believe it was the 3rd game, and he came in, and I believe he only came in for 1 or 2 series, but he looked awesome, right? So there was all of this optimism that just went to an all-time high to say, this guy, he's able to manage the playbook that Gase has given him. He's able to work with these great weapons that we had, because of course the Dolphins had the best weapons at wide receiver, and then you've got the running backs, and you've got this defense that has been rebuilt over the offseason, or not rebuilt, but at least built up further because of all the problems that we had last season. So you were encouraged by the preseason. And then you go into the season, and I'll never forget these first couple of games where Jay Cutler was hesitant. Let's just call it what it was. He was hesitant to throw the ball deep. He was hesitant to make decisions. Some people blame that on Gase and his play calling. But the fact of the matter is, Adam Gase gives a play, and Jay Cutler basically determines where he's going to throw the ball to, how far he's going to throw it down the field, and what he's going to do with it. And many of times, if you remember, it was so frustrating because he was basically making those short passes. He was dinking and dunking and trying to throw a lot to the running backs, and he wasn't moving down the field. I mean, the first game that we won, obviously, it was a 19-17 win over the Chargers. But that second game against the New York Jets in New York, in front of all the fans and in front of the MetLife takeover group, we lost 20-6. And that was the moment I said we're in trouble. Because this guy was making bad decisions. He couldn't make decisions. And I said, until they make that change, he is not going to be able to be the quarterback that's going to help us get to the playoffs, right? Which was ultimately our goal hopefully get deep into the playoffs, but repeat in the playoffs. Then then we went to Tennessee. We lost New Orleans at our home game in England. We won our game by luck against the Tennessee Titans. And then the Atlanta Falcons game was where things kind of started changing a little bit, because the Atlanta Falcons, you look at it from halftime going forward, that's when the Dolphins, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they were on 17 points. They came back from being 17 points down at the half to go and win that game in Atlanta, which was that was very encouraging, because he said, okay, this guy can do it, right? Maybe he's figured it out. Maybe it took 5 weeks for Jay Cutler to figure it out. Then we beat New York Jets, and that was like, all right, great. Again, we're putting some wins together. And then he put those losses together. It was basically, again, it was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Jay Cutler, of what everyone said, all the negatives came out. He was making bad decisions. He wasn't able to get the ball down the field. And then, of course, he goes and gets hurt. So, and then, of course, we've got our couple of wins against Denver, and then our beautiful win against the New England Patriots on Monday night. And again, you're ecstatic. Maybe there's a chance if we win out, there's a final couple of games, maybe we can make it to the playoffs. And then what does he do? He goes and loses the final 3 games of the season. Now, of course, the last game wasn't his fault. But so, again, everything started with the injury to Ryan Tannehill's knee, or the re-injury of his knee. And I think the moment we got Jay Cutler, that made a huge difference to the way 2017 ended. I will tell you, and to back up what Chad said, there was an opportunity for the Dolphins to build up their team, to coach their team, not find guys through free agents, and have backups just in case this were to happen. I mean, you look at the Minnesota Vikings, and I know they went to the championship game for the NFC, but they got there with a backup quarterback, and our backup quarterback was the guy.
That's
exactly
the shocking
Case
thing.
Keenum. Anything is possible if Case Keenum's bringing your team to the NFC playoffs. But you look at our backup, right? We had Matt Moore, and how many times in the last couple of years did you hear Matt Moore over Ryan Tannehill whenever Ryan Tannehill would have a problem? Well, last year he had the opportunity to do it. He couldn't get us past the first round of the playoffs, even though he had a couple of games getting us there. But this year was his opportunity, right? This year, when Jay Cutler went down, he had the opportunity to bring us to the playoffs, because we were still in the middle of the season, so there was a lot of games left to be played. But he basically proved that he is not the backup quarterback that the Miami Dolphins need. We need a backup quarterback that can step in and can win us games consistently. And if our starting quarterback if our starting quarterback isn't able to make it the whole way, you've got somebody there that's going to be able to help. I mean, look at what's happening in Philadelphia right now too. Nick Foles, backup. Wouldn't you have loved to have Nick Foles instead of Matt Moore? And I think that's really up for debate, of course, too. But they've got that right. Go ahead. Sorry, Liz.
No, I just said, nah. That was my answer.
Oh, okay. Exactly. Well, I think when you look at that and you look at where we are with the defense this season as well, Raekwon McMillan going down was a huge, huge hit for all of us, because our starting linebackers would have been Raekwon McMillan, would have been Kiko Alonso, and Lawrence Timmons. And Lawrence Timmons and Kiko Alonso would have been in their natural positions instead of being out of position. The fact that they were out of their position, it was very evident on the field. Kiko Alonso was running all over the field, and he could not stay pace with some of these younger and faster guys. So now the positives for us for this season is I think we have a very valid running back that can run 3 downs per. He can run every down if needed. I think we've got our wide receiver core, obviously Jarvis Landry, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little while. That's up in the air, but we do have some very positive wide receivers on our wide receiver core. Defense is going to be healthy, going to have an opportunity to draft if we need on that end. There's probably another position or two that would be helpful. And then offensively, obviously offensive line is always an area of opportunity, and then tight end is going to be an opportunity as well. But I was to say I was discouraged would be an understatement. I was expecting a lot more from the 2017 Miami Dolphins. But you know what? I've turned the page. I'm ready for 2018. I see the coaching changes that needed to be made, and now it's going to be up to the draft and free agency and see where we go from there.
And to add on to that, like Ian, you went to the game for Web Weekend, correct?
Yes, sir. I was at every home game except the one in London.
Yeah, well, like I'm sure that you were there. You were privy to all of the chants of "We want more, we want more." It really came to a head on Web Weekend. Everybody was screaming at the top of their lungs. There was a guy next to us who was absolutely going crazy. This one guy. I don't know if he was with the group or not, but he had shouted that it's like he was hoping that Cutler's like head got taken off. I'm like, dude. I know I don't want Cutler in there either, but holy moly.
Well, all the fans definitely got what they wanted. They had an opportunity to see more for a couple of games, and unfortunately he did get hurt, but fortunately we got to see him in action.
Yeah, but you know what, Ian, and you too, Chad, is like, even with what happened, I know that Matt Moore is not going to cut it for a whole season, but I still, to this day, feel like Matt Moore did a better job overall than Cutler. I still feel that way because it's like just watching them both play, it still felt like that Matt Moore was able to do a better job throwing the football, getting the team down the field, firing them up, all of those things that you want your quarterback to do. He did a better job of it than Jay Cutler. It didn't amount to wins, and of course Gase put Cutler back in as soon as he was ready, but I still feel like Moore would have been the better option for that season. I still feel like we really did waste $10 million on Jay Cutler.
I think absolutely that's true, Lewis. I think that was a waste of $10 million. I don't disagree with the evaluations, that Ian's given. It was a good review of the ups and downs of Jay Cutler. The problem I have is whether it is Case Keenum or Nick Foles is I think this question needs to be directly proposed to the Dolphins management, and they need to be accountable of why was Matt Moore the backup quarterback. Nobody has said that, but obviously Adam Gase did not feel Matt Moore could start for this team. The moment Ryan Tannehill gets down, they're immediately on the phone with Jay Cutler. And so that's my immediate question is, why was Ryan Tannehill the backup? And I keep hearing this phrase, Adam Gase is a quarterback whisperer. If Adam Gase is a quarterback whisperer, why have we not drafted a quarterback for him to work with? Why are we having a quarterback that he doesn't even believe that can start? Why is Brandon Doughty the third quarterback when the moment Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, we had to run out and sign TJ Yates? So that's what I'm questioning on personnel management is, why are these players on the team that Adam Gase does not feel can start? That's the same question I have with Mike Hall. And there's definitely no disrespect to Mike Hall, but I question, why is he being listed as our backup linebacker when the moment Key McMillan gets hurt, we got to run out, we got to go sign another linebacker.
That exploded too, because he went and did something really stupid.
He failed. But I'm highly questioning, why are these people being retained? Why are they paying Matt Moore $2 to $3 million of salary cap space when he's not a backup quarterback? Because that's my immediate response is, he's not a backup quarterback in Adam Gase's eyes, because he immediately had to go get Jay Cutler to be the starter. And so I have a lot of questions on what is going on with the talent evaluations and the personnel decisions, because that makes zero sense that Matt, any team in the NFL, I would say, if their starting quarterback gets hurt, their backup quarterback would be the intended guy that would take over for him. You go out and you sign another guy to back him up, I understand that. Like, if you would have went out to get another quarterback to, just in case Matt Moore gets hurt, okay, I'm fine with that. But they didn't. They went immediately out to a quarterback to try to start for the team because they didn't feel Matt Moore was capable of doing that. And we really don't know. He didn't look spectacular in there. But I agree with you, Lewis. I think he could have probably got us to 6-10 just fine.
Well, that's what Cutler did.
So anyway, that's the gripe I have, and it's the same gripe I'm throwing out there with other players. Is where we're getting with these guys on these caps, because it's this reoccurring narrative that Jarvis Landry is not worth $14 million a year. Well, maybe he's not. Olivier Vernon is not worth what the Giants paid him. I would agree with both those statements. They're probably not. That's probably overpaying him. What I'm wondering is, how are we getting there in the first place? Why wasn't Olivier Vernon given Andre Branch's contract, a year before his contract was up?
Vernon would have, because Vernon was better than Branch to begin with. Vernon would not have accepted Branch's deal.
he very well may have a year prior. I guess you're never going to know what a player will accept and not accept. But for whatever reason, the Dolphins are failing at getting these young guys under contract before they get out in the open. Why wasn't Charles Clay retained before he was a free agent, and we had to go get Jordan Cameron? It doesn't make sense to me. We should have retained Charles Clay a year prior, because I don't think anybody's going to argue with me that Charles Clay is a better football player than Jordan Cameron was. I mean, Jordan Cameron was not able to do anything with the team when he was healthy, whereas Charles Clay was having a great season with Ryan Tannehill the prior year. And again, it's this theme that I'm throwing out there. Why are our own players being allowed to leave the team like this? And we keep getting this continual narrative, well, they're overpriced. The reason they're overpriced is we're letting their contracts expire, and we're turning around and we're shelling out money to other people that were never drafted. I mean, if you probably look down and look at our salary cap right now, who are the most highly paid players on our team, how many of those are actually originally our players that we drafted? Most of our players have been run out of here because, again, the narrative is they're not worth what they're asking. They're not worth what they're asking.
All right, here's your top 5, by the way, Chad, since you asked. And Ndamukong Suh is number 1. That's no surprise. He's going to be against $26 million against the cap this year. Whew, dang.
Right. Which, he's an all-pro, but not somebody we drafted.
Okay, Ryan Tannehill, 19.8.
Okay.
Rashad Jones, 11.575.
Okay.
And then you have number 4 is Andre Branch. He's going to be against $10 million. And Kenny Stills, 9.750.
Right. So we have more players on our payroll, the top players, that were from other teams than were from our own.
Right.
This isn't something I've ever done, but it would be an interesting study to maybe go through the teams in the NFL and see which ones are the most successful, and see maybe the top 10 or top 5 players paid on their team. How many of them are their former number 1 draft picks or high draft picks that they brought in on their team and they've retained, versus their top paid players are players that were originally drafted by other teams. That's a concerning trend.
Well, let me bring. Oh, go ahead, Ian.
No, I was just going to say, and I think there's definitely some truth to that, and I think one of my gripes has been, that we need to be able to coach our players up more than getting people or players that have been coached by other teams and then having them come here already coached to a very high level. But I think some of that also has to do with, who we're getting in at what time. So when you look at Kenny Stills, right, he was number 4 on your list, Lewis, if I remember right. He was
number 5.
Got him in a trade.
He was number 5. Branch is number 4.
Number 5. So, we got him in a trade, and if I remember right, and it was with New Orleans, we got him while he was still on his rookie contract. So we were kind of testing him out to see how he was going to do, and there was no guarantee that he was going to be successful while he was with us. So he had a great season. The Dolphins rewarded him because they wanted to make sure that they retained him. And here's the point that I'm trying to make, though. They didn't coach him up enough in New Orleans for him to be successful there, or for them to want to retain him there. However, when he came to the Miami Dolphins, he was successful here. So if that was either due to coaching or due to scheme or due to whatever it was, the Dolphins rewarded him because he did play better while he was with the Dolphins versus when he was with New Orleans. Other people would also probably argue to say, he was competing with 2 or 3 other top talent wide receivers in New Orleans, so he never got the ball. But that's another aspect there. When you look at Andre Branch, they signed, if I remember correctly, they signed Andre Branch to either 1 or 2 year contract originally because they didn't know if he was going to work out. He was an older gentleman, older player. He was kind of going a little down in his career, and he came here, and guess what? He had a great season. They didn't expect him to have a great season. I think they expected him to have a good season, but he had a really good season. He had a great season when he was, not this year, but prior year. And then, of course, this year he got his contract, he got paid, and he took a step or 2 back. But I don't think that's always the case. And I think, when you look at Ndamukong Suh, his contract is a monster, and it's something that was never done up to the point when he got signed.
And they want to restructure him, Ian. They want to push it even further down the line. It's like, you can't restructure. You're going to have to pay the piper at some point.
Yeah, no, and but he is a great player. He's not. Is he a game changer? I think there's a lot of people that would say he is, and there's a lot of people that say he's not. but he is still a very, very good player, and he's one of the best players that we do have on defense when it comes to trying to stop that middle piece. But so I agree with you, Chad, in the respect that we do have to spend more time and more effort coaching our players, and I'm hoping that that's the reason that Adam Gase has elected to change many of his coaches, because he didn't see that. I mean, you look at compare it to your real world, and we all have jobs, we all work in different places, and if you have a manager that's coaching his or her staff, that's going to make everybody better. That's going to make the whole team better. And the same thing can be said for the football team. When you have a coach that's coaching their players appropriately and developing their players appropriately, the entire team is going to get better. So that's definitely an opportunity, and that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I wanted to follow up there with Louis, just some of the stuff you guys are talking about. And I agree, Kenny Stills has not been a bad player, and I don't disagree even with the trade. I like Stills, and now granted, I'm jumping between cross management, different general managers from different time periods. But I think you could make a strong argument, and I could say the last 2 or 3 years, Ted Ginn's a pretty comparable player to Kenny Stills in terms of production. You could argue Kenny Stills is better than Ted Ginn Jr. I'm not really interested in making a big debate about it, but I'm making the point is Ted Ginn was drafted by us. Ted Ginn is gone, and he's performing for another team, and he seems like a comparable player to me to Kenny Stills. I think Olivier Vernon is a comparable player to Andre Branch. Olivier Vernon he's younger, maybe has a little more upside, but they're comparable players. But again, Olivier Vernon is not with us. I would make the argument that Lamar Miller is a comparable player to Jay Ajayi. Some people would agree, some people would disagree. But if I'm looking at just production, you could disagree. But I'm just making the point. Jay Ajayi to date has not done anything more special than Lamar Miller ever did in his career, and Lamar Miller is gone, and Jay Ajayi is also gone now.
Well, I would definitely disagree on that point, Chad, because Ajayi definitely did a lot more than Miller ever did.
Well, that's fine. I'm just making the point, though. Lamar Miller was the starting running back this year for the Texans, was he not?
That is true.
And so he definitely is. Lamar Miller definitely was not a player who was out of the league shortly after he left the Dolphins because he wasn't capable. He was able to be the featured back for another team. I could make the argument that Deion Sims would have been every bit as good as Julius Thomas, if not better. He's a better blocker.
I would have preferred Sims all day.
The reason I'm throwing all these names out is these are all our players that are gone. And I think I wanted to just make the point. I'm being very critical of, I know it's different management from different time periods, but I don't want to see our current management repeating the same thing where you're running off your own players because you don't want to pay them, but you're more than willing to pay players from other teams. Now, is that screaming? I think Ian made a good point. To me, that's saying we are not able to develop our own guys. So our own guys leave and they go to a different team where they have success, and we try to go out and grab players that were on other teams because they seem to be more developed than our own players. That's this reoccurring trend, and it has not been successful for a few decades now. And so it's just frustrating to me that we're at with Jarvis Landry, and I realize that Juwan James has not been a dominant tackle, but again, he's gone. It creates another hole. We've got to go get another tackle now, and it's just another waste of a first-round pick because when we draft people, when we're all excited, when we bring guys in, are we looking at them to be they're just a 4-year player, then we're going to get them out of here because we don't want to pay them. So we just draft players for a 4-year plan. And you know what? Coming right up, it sure looks like Devontae Parker is on that same course, that in a year or two, Devontae Parker is going to be freed up, and there's going to be a team out there that's going to look at his talent and look at his production and going to say, we can coach this guy and he can be a stud. And the Dolphins are going to say, he's never done anything, he's not worth it. It just appears he's on that same course as another number one pick that in a year or two is going to be off to a different team because we don't feel he's worth whatever his asking price is when he becomes a free agent. So I don't want to repeat those steps right now with our current guys. And I'm hoping that we can get that together. But that's not really meant to be a critique of Adam Gase. It's more just meant to point out the fact that we have continuously run our own guys off and replace them with people from other teams. Really, comparably weren't that much more successful on our team than the player we let go on another team.
And I'm actually getting comments from the YouTube chat. It's like Matthew Colson says, that's the story of this team. Poorly ran, trickles down from the top. But just to follow up on that real quick, I want to know how far up does this run? Like, because we can say that it's Gase's fault, or we can say it's Greer's fault, or we can say it's Tannenbaum's fault. But when I hear the top, I think we're blaming Stephen Ross again. And look, guys, we can say that Stephen Ross doesn't know football, and he doesn't. Stephen Ross doesn't know anything about football. He's a businessman. But you can't tell me he doesn't want to win. And he has never shown any signs of being a bad owner. He has never withheld money. This guy is literally willing to pay like big blank checks. Like, here's a blank check. You tell me how much you want to make. Just make my football team win. That he's always been that way. And if you want to blame him for not knowing football, that doesn't make him a bad owner. That just means that he doesn't know who to go to fix the problem. So that I can't blame him on.
No, I was just going to say I'm the biggest Stephen Ross advocate as much as I can on Twitter and on social media, just because you're absolutely right, Lewis. You know, he goes and he spends $500 million of his own money on a stadium. Obviously, he's going to get some benefits as we get these very nice events that are going to be taking place there. He will spend whatever money it takes to get the best coaches, the best leaders of the organization, because he does want to win. He's very passionate about it, and I think he's frustrated at this point as well, as are all of the Dolphins fans, that we haven't been able to move in the right direction. But he is nothing short of giving for our community and for our team. And I will continue to be an advocate for him until I see otherwise.
Yeah, and that's the.
I agree with you on that. I don't think we never really know what goes on behind closed doors, but I don't think Ross is attempting to get very involved in personnel movements or anything like that. Maybe he is, and we're not aware of it, but I don't think so. That he's trying to do it. I think he tries to give any resources he can to the people he brings in to handle things. But maybe. If you look at it that way and say maybe that is the problem, is he needs to be more involved with the team, because I think that's about the only fair critique you can make of Ross, is that he's not really a Florida person. He's more of a person from the New York area, and he's a very active business owner in other ventures. And so is he just not around enough that's why things aren't managed well enough? But I do think he tries to bring in his mind who are the best coaches and who are the best personnel men. I do think he tries to that. So it's hard for me to blame it on.
That's the only fair criticism. That's the only fair criticism you can make of him, is that he doesn't know who to go to.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I honestly, I feel more encouraged despite my unhappiness with the general reoccurring cycle. But I have thought the last two drafts were better than prior drafts from several years. At least,
they were great. I liked them.
At least we're getting players that are actually making the team and contributing. And so, in past years, we've had drafts where maybe one or two players even are around a year later after the draft. And that's horribly bad if you can't even draft guys that can make the team. So I can't say I feel too bad, at least with Greer and whoever is doing our talent evaluation. And I think Adam Gase has a strong input on who they're bringing in. I do think they're getting better football players. I do think one thing that's very encouraging is Adam Gase definitely upgraded his assistants. And I like that at least we don't have the Philbin in him, if you will, where he just doesn't want to switch assistants out. He cleaned house. And Adam Gase is sending a message to both personnel on the team and
he kind of cleaned house. Well, there's still a bunch of guys who nobody wants here, like Matt Burke.
Well, I think he's making changes, and he's putting, I think, the assistant coaches on notice that, look, if you're assigned to the receivers, or you're assigned to the offensive line, or you're assigned to the defensive line, if your unit does not execute as they're supposed to, you're gone. That's your responsibility. And so he is bringing in a high degree of accountability, and Adam Gase definitely is not being passive in my mind. I think he's trying to take control and fix the problems. I'm definitely encouraged with Gase so far as a coach. I think the real question that I think is valid right now of Adam Gase is he taking on too much by trying to be the offensive play caller. And so does that detract from him having an overall feel of all those units, all the teams, getting everybody ready? Because he's having to figure out the game plan that he wants to execute and the plays he wants to call. And I have to think that's a very time-consuming thing that most head coaches have their offensive coordinator taking care of. And so I know has swapped out and brought in a new offensive coordinator, and maybe that'll help him be more efficient. But there's just not that many coaches. I know some do it, but I think that's a huge challenge for a young coach with Gase, is to be trying to both call the plays and as well as manage the team. But I still think he's the right candidate. I don't think they can go out and do better. I think he's had a few good drafts, and so I do think I'm encouraged by the direction Adam Gase is taking the team. I'm a huge advocate that it's a huge mistake if they let Jarvis Landry go. And I've been seeing these feeds like, well, he's not worth it. He's a slot receiver. Look, Jarvis Landry just broke the record on the number of receptions in the first 3 years. And anybody who's watched hardly any Dolphin football realizes he's a very solid football player. And I'm laughing at the narrative that he's not that good. We should let him go. And I'm thinking, what are you looking at? What are you watching? He's one of the best receivers we've ever had, in my opinion. Granted, he isn't a 4-4 guy that you can send continuously on deep patterns, but he's got very good hands, and we definitely do not have a replacement on the team that can replace Jarvis Landry. We'd have to go out, spend the money in free agency anyway, or you're going to have to give up a high draft pick, which we have a lot of other needs right now to address. And so, again, this situation is what it is. But I will say right now, if they don't get Jarvis Landry under contract or they don't franchise him, he will be gone. If they transition take him, he'll be gone. Or if they let him test the market, he will be gone, because there's just too many teams out there right now with salary cap space that will just pay him. Olivier Vernon is a perfect example of he'll get that massive contract even if he's not worth it, because teams out there have the cap space to do it. And if you look at teams right now who are trying to fill holes like the New York Jets or the Buffalo Bills or the Baltimore Ravens, all teams directly in our path to make the playoffs typically, that's where Jarvis Landry is going to go, because those teams are desperate for a receiver with his skill set, and they will figure out a way to give him the money he needs. And so I think it's a vital situation right now that this team gets him under contract, and if they've got to pay him $60 million under a franchise tag, then they need to do it, because I think it'll make it a lot harder to be a playoff team next year if you let him walk to a competitor like that.
I actually have a little bit of a different opinion on that, which is not the popular opinion.
No, I think I know where you're going with this. But go ahead.
So my real quick though, I do want to touch on Adam Gase, because I agree with you, Chad. I think he is the right coach of this team. He has the passion that you want to see from a coach. He does have motivational techniques, which I know many of us don't see, but does happen in the locker room. Last season, his motivational technique was getting rid of some guys that needed to be gotten rid of in the middle of the season. He let Ajayi go. I don't think we're going to see the reason for that, at least probably for another season or two. But obviously he saw the writing in the wall with our current running back. So he's the right guy. And I do trust in the decisions that he's making. I do also agree that he should be giving up his offensive play calling responsibilities, because.
But you know what? Wait, hold on, Ian. This is a weird thing. I'm going to talk about this real quick before we get back to Landry. A lot of head coaches lately seem to be jumping in here with the idea that they're going to call the plays on offense. Like a lot of them. I'm pretty sure who is the new coach who's going to come in and he's going to be calling plays for his new team too. Who was it? I can't remember. I can't remember which team, but it was like he said, like, I'm going to be the head coach and I'm also calling plays. That seems to be the norm nowadays. Like Doug Peterson, doesn't he call plays for the Eagles?
I'm not sure.
He might. I'm not overly opposed to it, Lewis. I'm just making the point that the team's having a lot of execution troubles the first 2 years under him as head coach, and it was a mess this year with the assistants getting people ready. That's why he's cleaning house. And I just make the point. I don't know if it's easy for him to keep a good feel for what's going on with all the units, because he has that huge workload of having to run the offensive game plan, because I realize he has somebody help him, but he's got to be preparing all week, deciding which plays he wants to execute and which plays that they want to get the team prepared for. And so I'm just wondering if that's one of the reasons they're having so much execution trouble, because even in their playoff year, in his first year, the team really struggled with execution. And that's you can't continuously have receivers running wrong routes and offensive linemen doing all these false starts and things that are just execution errors. And that, to me, that was the most frustrating thing this year, is watching that. I mean, I'd say the hardest game for me to stomach this year was the Tampa Bay game, because when we played Tampa Bay this year, they were god awful with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and we just had to be worse. It was one of those situations where we had to play that bad. And that was when it was running through my mind, is, are these coaches able to get these guys just to execute? Because it was, in my mind, we had the much better team on the field, but we were just making mistake after mistake after mistake. So that did cross my mind, is there a way to fix that? And obviously one way is to get in a bunch of new coordinators, but that was my other thought, was maybe we would be better off if he wasn't calling the plays. And, it's a fair. I think some people would agree with me that I don't know that Adam Gase has been doing a great job of play selection so far, but maybe that's not fair because their execution wasn't there. But, I don't know. To me, I'm 50-50 on it right now, whether he should be calling the plays or not, if that'd be beneficial.
And by the way, by the way, real quick, Lake McGroove in the chat for YouTube, he says that it's Matt Nagy in Chicago and Pat Shurmur in New York Giants, both new head coaches, and they're both going to be calling plays for their offense.
Excellent. Well, and what I was going to say is that he needs to be a head coach. He needs to not be an offensive coordinator. I think that's what it boils down to. As a head coach, your responsibility is offense, is defense, is special teams, is every single person and every single coach on that team. And when he's calling plays, like Chad said, when he's planning the plays for the week, that's taking time away that he should be looking at the different units and trying to figure out how to improve or how to best get these guys in the best situation to play. And the fact of the matter is, some of the play calling that he did call didn't work out this season. It did, mind you, last season when they changed the focus from passing to running. But the 2017 season, it was, I think it was probably a D in my book from a play calling perspective. So we'll see how 2018 turns out, because it sounds like he's going to keep the play calling duties going forward. But if things don't start up quickly in 2018 for him, he may end up transitioning it to his offensive coordinator so that he can actually do some real-time coaching. So I did want to talk a little bit about Jarvis Landry, because I know it's a big hot topic. A couple days ago, obviously there was some news, and Twitter was blowing up with the Lang Gang, I think is what they call it, or the Landry
Gang.
Yes, the Landry Gang. So I love Jarvis Landry. He is a phenomenal player. He has the right drive, and that's something that you can't teach and you can't coach, right? But I think part of his success with the Miami Dolphins has been the quarterback that has been under center, number one. Number two, the schemes that have been called, and number three, sometimes it's just plain old luck, right? But I have a question for you guys. Jarvis Landry has been a 1,000-yard receiver for the last 2 years. Who is the prior Miami Dolphins receiver that caught 1,000 yards before Jarvis Landry came to town?
I'm pretty sure it was Brian Hartline.
You're right. 2012, he received 1,083 yards, and in 2013, he received 1,016 yards. What's the difference between those guys?
I think Jarvis Landry makes game-changing plays. I'm just going to throw some games out. There was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were playing the Washington Redskins on an opening week. He ran the kick return. They decided the game for a touchdown. Last year against the Rams, I know he got pushed in the end zone, but he literally ran over a linebacker, stayed on his feet. He consistently runs people over to get an extra few yards that often results in first downs. And he has very good hands. Brian Hartline, to me, was a product of Joe Philbin's pass-first offense, and they threw a lot of sideline routes to him. Not taking anything away from Brian Hartline, but I can tell you confidently right now, is Brian Hartline even in the league anymore?
Not
even
anymore.
Cleveland dumped him.
When Brian Hartline left the Dolphins, he was gone because he was not that good of a receiver from a speed standpoint, and he couldn't hook on with another team. I'm telling you right now, whether you agree with what Jarvis Landry should get paid or not get paid, he is going to get paid. I guarantee the Baltimore Ravens will line up immediately and pay him $14 or $15 million a year, and he will be very good on that team. And so that's just what I'm just making the point. Look, he played this year under his rookie contract and made $1 million. Jarvis Landry risked having his knee destroyed in a game, and he would have never had more than his rookie contract, which isn't, I mean, to you and me, that's a lot of money, but to an NFL player, Jarvis Landry risked, being financially set to play one more year under his rookie deal. And he put himself in this position, and Miami let him be in this position. I feel like they could have probably paid him. I don't know this, but I feel like if they had paid him $12 to $13 million a year last year, we would have had him under contract. I realize he is a slot receiver, so he gets fed the ball in this offense. But different from Brian Hartline, I feel like if you let Jarvis Landry walk, he's going to be very successful on a different football team. And you're going to be watching another guy we drafted have very good years for the next 4 or 5 years on a different football team. And I just hoping if he walks that he doesn't end up on the New York Jets or the Buffalo Bills or the Baltimore Ravens, because we consistently are in the wild card competition with Baltimore. They consistently whip our ass when we play them. And I worst case scenario for me is Jarvis Landry walks. We still have a good year next year. We meet up with the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs, and we lose because Jarvis Landry just lights us up. And so I don't know. I feel like the teams that are desperately would be willing to desperately pay him are teams that we're going to have to get by. And so it's going to be a double whammy if he goes.
And I want to clarify something too. It's obvious Brian Hartline and Jarvis Landry are not the same player.
Lake McGroove on the chat just let me know that Hartline is currently a coaching intern at Ohio State.
Oh, good. Well, that's his alma mater, if I remember correctly, right?
Good for him, I guess.
Good for it. Well, he was a good guy too. So with Jarvis Landry, I think he is. I think he's a great player, like I said at the very beginning. But I do think part of it is the system that we're in. The fact that our quarterback, especially this year, was not able to throw it too many times down the field. So they ended up dumping a lot to Jarvis, who's a slot receiver. I do believe the man should be paid. He's a great player. He has sacrificed a lot and a lot of risk to have made it to the end of this past season. So I think he should be paid, but I don't think he should be paid as number one wide receiver. I do not. And there's a lot of,
that's the problem.
There's a lot of debate around what a number one receiver looks like on a football team. As a number one receiver, that guy that's going to be able to outrun the defenders and make a catch over a defender, and get you 60, 70 yards on a play, right? Or is your number one receiver going to be a slot receiver who's going to get 115 catches a year, where he's over 1,000 yards in the season? My belief is that someone who gets paid as a number one is going to be that person that gains you the most yards and the biggest chunk plays. That's my opinion. Different people have very different opinions from that. Some people say, well, your number one receiver should be your emotional leader, should be the leader on your offense. And I don't disagree with that. But I just have a different opinion of it. So I do not think that going forward, Landry should be our number one receiver, even though he has been from a numbers perspective. I don't think your slot receiver should ever be your number one on your team, because if it does, if your slot receiver ends up being your number one receiver, I think you've got bigger problems as a team. Now, him going to another team, I'm going to disagree with you, Chad. I think if he ends up leaving the Miami Dolphins and he goes to another team, I think depending on how that team schemes, I don't think he would be as successful as he is here at the Miami Dolphins. Now, of course, I'd root for him because I love Juice, and I love what he brings from an attitude perspective. And again, like I said at the very beginning, attitude is not something that you can teach. But I don't think he would be successful somewhere else. And I know that's against
define successful, Ian. Define successful.
A successful catching 1,000 yards in a season.
Okay.
I don't think that would happen somewhere else.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll just make the point. Like I don't disagree. I absolutely agree that Jarvis Landry does not impact your team like a Julio Jones per se, or an AJ Green, or an Antonio Brown. He is not that kind of receiver because he's not that tall and he's not that fast. I agree with that. But the reality for the Dolphins is he is going to get paid that, whether he has those stats or not. I feel very confident if Jarvis Landry, just look at the available wide receivers. I mean, what are your other options out there in the free agent market?
Allen Robinson.
If he gets to there, he hasn't hit the market yet. Sammy Watkins, maybe, who's had a lot of injury history. Jarvis Landry is in his prime. He's caught more passes than anybody in the history of the league, and he has no health issues. Those guys get paid. That's how the NFL works. And so he's going to get a big contract. And so Miami's in the situation where, okay, you can let Landry go because he's not a number one wide receiver, but it creates the hole then for the Dolphins because they've already invested a number one draft pick in Devontae Parker, and they've already invested a big contract into Kenny Stills. So are you going to then go out and draft a number one wide receiver again? Are you going to go pay another guy a big contract but not quite as much money? And so are we talking about we don't want to pay Jarvis Landry $14 million, we want to go pay this receiver $9 to $10 million? Is that $3 to $4 million going to be worth it? And history suggests no. That we're going to probably get a receiver that's not as good as Jarvis Landry, and Jarvis Landry will move on to another team. And so I just think if he goes, we're doing nothing but creating another hole. And I really don't care what a number one wide receiver should be paid. What I want to stop happening is we just create more holes every year that we've got to refill, and we never can get a team that actually gets better. And so I look at our lineup right now, if Cordell Tankersley, is he actually going to be our starting corner next year? Is Tony Lippett going to be back? So there's a really strong case we're going to need another corner. That's a high draft pick to get one or a lot of money. We've let Juwan James go, so we're either going to have to draft an offensive tackle or pay one, which is very expensive to pay in free agency, or you've got to give up a high draft pick. We don't have any quarterbacks, in my opinion, on the roster other than Ryan Tannehill. As a discussion we just had, Matt Moore's not our backup. He's gone. I can't imagine they're going to realistically go into the season with Fales as our number 2 quarterback. So we've either got to pay somebody in free agency, like we're going to have to pay a Sam Bradford type of player to be our a veteran backup, or we've got to use a high draft pick on one of the rookies. And so as you start to compound these, we need a tight end. We have no running back behind Kenyon Drake right now. I don't even think Damian Williams is under contract. Ajayi's gone. We have no backup running back right now. And so we have all these holes. And so to me, letting Landry go, you're creating another big hole that was one of the primary producers on your offense. And so we're going to have to pay a good wide receiver good money in free agency, or we're going to have to use a high draft pick to replace him, which does nothing but just keeps the team in that mediocre range. Because if we get that slot receiver to replace him, then we're going to have to skimp on getting the right player to help our defensive backfield. We're going to have to skimp on getting a quality offensive lineman, or the holes that we don't have the player on our team right now. And so that's my overall concern with letting players like him go. And it just worries me that we're going to end up next year with another 8-8 roster because we just weren't willing to keep the good players we had and let them go because, again, you have this imaginary, he's not worth that. I don't really care about salaries. I care about having the best possible team on the field right now. And you just have limited resources, limited cap space, limited draft picks to replace him.
Chad, I'm going to ask you this, and I want you to be honest with me here, because I am kind of more on Ian's side of the debate here. What does Jarvis offer that no one else does? Serious question.
For right now, for this team, the Dolphins, he catches the football. And so we lost the Seahawks last year because Kenny Stills dropped the football. You can't realistically tell me that Jakeem Grant's even a realistic option. He has terrible hands. He dropped a pass wide open against the Patriots last year. Jarvis Landry catches the football when the game's on the line. he makes enormous plays when the game is on the line. We don't have anybody on our team right now that I feel confident is a player that fits that type of description on our team. Can Kenyon Drake be a really good? He has the ability. Kenyon Drake has never played a full season in college. And so I highly question whether Kenyon Drake will be able to stay healthy for a full year as our workhorse running back next year. Jakeem Grant has never showed consistency catching the ball. Kenny Stills has never showed consistency catching the ball. Devontae Parker has never showed consistency staying healthy. Jarvis Landry has suited up for every game, showed up, caught the ball, and made plays. And so, to me, you're getting rid of your most consistent player on the team because you don't want to pay him an extra $2 to $3 million, and you can get somebody else to play slot receiver cheaper. I think that's going to be a big challenge to bring somebody in to replace him. And to me, letting him go, all you're doing is you're just settling back into that mediocrity of just looking for players that maybe aren't as good. So I mean, that's my question. Is it better to overpay a good football player, or is it better to pay an average player what he's worth? Which puts the better player on your team? What's the better team on the field?
Well, let me say this, because here's the thing that you're right, Chad. You honestly are, but then I'm having people tell me, is like, boy, don't we wish that we had signed Rashard Matthews? He would have been able to soften the blow of Jarvis Landry. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. You guys think that Rashard Matthews is comparable to Jarvis Landry? Why? If Jarvis Landry is so special, then nobody should be able to compare to him. He should be Jarvis Landry. End of discussion. There shouldn't be anybody that you can look at and say, this guy could do the job that Jarvis is doing. But if we're bringing up guys like Rashard Matthews, who could have taken over in the slot should Jarvis leave, aren't we, technically speaking, just looking back again and saying, boy, we should have signed this guy? And this is what I'm talking about here, is that we're talking about developing our own talent, but at the same time, we're also saying that we don't want to develop our own talent because we would have to get rid of other talent in order to do that. This is why me personally, believe me, I want Jarvis back. I want him back. I don't want him to go. He's the most entertaining player on the field at any given moment. But I think that's kind of part of the discussion here. Is Jarvis as a player really that indispensable? Or do we want Jarvis around because he's the only guy that brings us any excitement on any given Sunday? Because we want to see what Jarvis is going to do. We want to see him get fired up. We want to see him get angry at the other team. We want to see him do all of these great things. And he also does some not great things, but I digress. Jarvis's heart cannot be duplicated. But his skill set, I'm honestly not convinced we don't have somebody like that. You were mentioned Jakeem Grant, and his hands are inconsistent. Yeah, that's true. But but so were Ted Ginn's hands, and that was why he failed in Miami, because we had placed first round expectations on Ted Ginn that he couldn't live up to. As a fifth rounder, Jakeem Grant is an incredible weapon, and we see what happens when he gets the ball in his hands. But as it stands right now, we don't have a place for him. And how long are we going to let him sit on the sidelines and not be able to do what it is that he does? Jakeem Grant, I think, is better at making guys miss than Jarvis is. I really do. He doesn't have his hands aren't as good as Jarvis, but he's better at making guys miss. And not to mention that, Jakeem is also a heck of a lot faster. He could be in the slot, and he can also have that extra versatility of going outside because he can run that fast. Jarvis can't go outside, not and be successful. And then you have guys like Rashawn Scott or Malcolm Lewis or Isaiah Ford, who we drafted, and those guys are all possible slot receiver guys. And in the case of Scott specifically, he is a very talented young man who I would say is that exact guy that we wanted to say, well, we should have kept Rashard Matthews. We have a Rashard Matthews. We arguably have like 3 Rashard Matthews. And they're just waiting there on the sidelines for a spot to open up. And do we want to pay Jarvis 13 to 14 million? I understand why you want to keep him around. It's not like whoever comes in is going to be Jarvis right away or even ever. But if we're looking for consistency, who's to say nobody else can do that?
Guys, I want to
I want to talk about the monkey in the room here real quick. The gorilla in the room, I think is the correct saying. How many wide receivers for the New England Patriots are making over $9 million a year right now?
Give me a minute and I'll look it up.
All right, I'll tell you. None.
I'll guess
All right?
0.
Oh, he already has it up probably.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the salaries right now. Their number one, which is truly their number one, that they call their number one, Brandon Cooks, makes $8.4 million a year, right? Their next wide receiver, who happens to be the slot, Julian Edelman, right? He makes $4.7 million a year. So the gorilla that I'm talking about is the Dolphins have to get to a place where they don't need to be paying top dollars for their players because they don't depend on individual players as much as they do. You see what they do in New England. You know, when a player gets too big for their britches, what do? They either trade them or they release them, right? Most likely they'll trade them because they want something back. They want a draft pick back, but they've gotten to a point where it doesn't hurt them as much to lose a top wide receiver or a top center that they had, traded away a couple seasons ago. I believe it was Logan Mankins, if I remember correctly. And he had been around for many, many years, but he was at the high end of his pay scale. So right now, the one person that gets the most money for the New England Patriots is their absolute best player, Tom Brady, and he makes all the difference in the world for that team. Second highest earner for their team, Stephon Gilmore, their cornerback. And then Rob Gronkowski, almost $11 million, but he has different talent than Juice and some of the other players that we have on our team. So my point with saying that was we have to get to a place where we don't need to worry about paying guys $14 million a year or $15 million a year to keep them. We've got to get to a place where we have the right players. We have the right farm system within our organization. We pick the right draft. We draft the right players. We pick up free agents that don't need to be the top of the scale, but mid-range free agents that will make an impact on the team. And you've got to coach. You got to coach the players that you have to be the best that they can possibly be.
I mean, I can't disagree with the Patriots, but I think there's 31 other teams in the league that would love to be able to do what the Patriots do. And the fact is the Patriots simply are a much better football team. They're better run, they're better coached, and they win because of that. And so the New England Patriots have the ability to draft an unknown wide receiver and turn him into a Julian Edelman. The Dolphins don't. And so Jarvis Landry, in my opinion, is the only wide receiver on the Dolphins that would even be able to play on the Patriots, just because the other ones aren't consistent enough. If you're not consistent, you're gone in New England. I absolutely understand the argument that Jarvis Landry is not worth $14 or $15 million a year, and I don't disagree with it. It's the Dolphins' fault that we're in that position to begin with, because they could have signed him a year ago. They could have signed him 2 years ago. And so they chose.
What would he have asked for a year ago or 2 years ago? I would think he would ask for the same.
We're never going to know what he was asking for. But I do know that it's a reoccurring theme in Miami to let our players go because we don't want to pay them what the market's willing to pay them. And so that's the same situation with Jarvis Landry right now. Is the reason that we're looking at him going is not what he's doing on the football field. I don't think Miami wants Jarvis Landry gone because they think Jakeem Grant's a better player. I don't think that's what the thought process is in the building right now, is that Jarvis Landry's not good. We have better players on our team. We want to just get him out of here. Thought on the team right now is he's not worth as much money as the market will pay him. And so that's why we've been losing players. And that's the argument I'm making with all the players we've lost, like Deion Sims, like Lamar Miller, Olivier Vernon, Ted Ginn, is the reason they're gone is our organization felt they weren't worth what the market was willing to pay them.
Well, nobody was willing to pay anything for Ted Ginn, just to be fair.
But he's still in the league.
He's still in the league now, but when we dumped him, we thought he was going to bust for sure, and
right.
For a while he did.
I'm not harping on Ted Ginn. I realize he hasn't had a dominant NFL career. I'm just arguing the trend that this is our cycle right now as a team, as we draft high draft picks. I mean, why did we waste a second-round pick on Jarvis Landry if he wasn't a player we're going to keep? Why are we wasting a first-round pick on Juwan James he's a player we don't want to keep. Because these guys are not playing that bad. It's not like Juwan James. We've seen bad. We've seen guys like Colombo at right tackle. And we've drafted Juwan James because we wanted at least a solid right tackle that wasn't just somebody that got run over every play like a Thomas and just got Tannehill sacked over and over. Juwan James isn't a Pro Bowl right tackle, but he's been decent, and he's going to go be decent on another football team. So I'm just making the point of we're using all of these draft picks on players that are talented that come in, and Jarvis Landry was a second-round pick that's coming and play well, and he's leaving again because the market's willing to pay him more than we are. And so stepping away from Jarvis Landry in general, I'm questioning our organization. Why is that trend just keep cycling? Why do the guys we draft high in 4 years go? Because the market's willing to pay them more than we are. Either we don't understand what our own players' value are, or the league tends to overplay our players for some reason versus other players. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me on why we keep getting into this situation. And I think a lot of it is we're paying money again for other players from other teams. And so that to me is one of the number one reasons that we are always this 8-8 sort of football team, that we're never a playoff contending football team, is because we continually cycle our own talent out the door, and we rely on free agent talent from other teams to try to plug all the holes we create when we do it. And so I just, again, if you send Jarvis Landry out the door and he gets overpaid by another team, and so let's say he only has 950 yards and 10 touchdowns for another team, that's good, but if our plan really is Jakeem Grant, I feel like that's a step back for our football team because he is so small. Is he going to stay healthy for an entire season? Can he take Jarvis Landry's workload and stay healthy? Because what good is he if he's only able to play 9 games out of the year? And so again, to me, it's just a step back in another hole. And, if you throw names out like Robinson, if we can get Allen Robinson, great, but he's going to probably get more money than Jarvis Landry is, or he's going to get paid a hefty salary again, and he may not even be willing to play for the Dolphins. So, it's easy to say this guy isn't worth it, but to me, that's always the narrative: is they're not worth it. There's never here's what we're doing that's going to actually be even better. It's get him out of here, and we'll worry about later how to replace him. And then again, we're in that situation where we could be in a situation in a year or two where Parker's gone and Landry's gone. Are they going to replace Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker with better receivers if that's the direction we go? And history suggests that we won't, but maybe with the new organization, they will be able to pull off Patriots type stuff, and we'll throw another guy in there and he'll just light it up in the slot. And I hope that's the case, and I hope I'm wrong. And I really hope that the Dolphins aren't 8-8 next year and the Ravens are winning the North because Jarvis Landry had 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns and really thrived in their system. So that's going to be we'll have to see how it unfolds.
Lake McGroove in the chat is saying last season Alshon Jeffrey signed for $14 million for that 1 year, and he's saying that would have been the asking price if Landry had gotten the extension. I can't disagree with his reasoning. It feels like that would be about what he would want from that extension. That's why I'm saying is that I don't think Landry's price has gone up. I think it's just continuation of what he wanted last year. And that in itself is the problem. Because here's the problem, Chad. Like, if you pay Jarvis, where are you getting the money from? Because right now our cap is a mess. It really is a mess.
I was making the point earlier that I've personally, you got to make tough decisions because we run in a tight cap. And I think that it would be much easier to replace Mike Pouncey than it is to replace Jarvis Landry. Mike Pouncey has bad hips. I don't see him playing more than 1 to 2 more years at most in the league. And I'll say the same thing about Cameron Wake. Cameron Wake's been a great football player for us. He's primarily a pass rusher. He's not a great edge setter. He's not that big. He's an amazing pass rusher, but he's 36 years old. I don't see Cameron Wake playing more than 1 to 2 more years. And so we're paying Cameron Wake $9 million unguaranteed. We're paying Mike Pouncey $9 million, pretty much unguaranteed. There's $18 million right there if we have to replace Cameron Wake and Mike Pouncey, which we've got to do in the next year to two anyway. They are not players in their primes. I would much rather pay somebody like Jarvis Landry or Juwan James, who are young in their prime and players that aren't that bad, and then replace the players that are going to go anyway. Because I don't know where are you going to end up. If you got to replace Jarvis Landry, then you've got to start over. You've got to go get another player in free agency or the draft that's a young playmaking football player. And then in a year or two, you've got to replace Cameron Wake and Mike Pouncey anyway because they're nearing the end of their careers. So to me, that's where I start. I think Julian Thomas is already gone. He's not going to stay. And so you can create the cap room. And, per year is nothing but it's just a fake number. It's all about guaranteed money. And I would gladly give Jarvis Landry a little bit less per year, which I think he would take if you guarantee a sizable proportion of it. Guarantee 3/4 of his contract. So he's staying here the next 4 years, and you're committing to him. My guess is that teams that are going to offer Jarvis Landry $14 or $15 million a year, they're not going to guarantee any more than 20 to 30% of that contract. So we're really talking about how much money are you willing to really give him to stay here. I don't think it's really about how much per year, because getting an extra $1 to $2 million a year is nothing compared to giving a much bigger percentage of your contract guaranteed. And I like it. This is just me being an armchair GM. I would rather guarantee money to young players in their prime rather than to pay money to players that are going to be gone in a year or two if you got to pick one or the other. I'm not saying I want Cameron Wake and Mike Pouncey gone. I'm just saying I would take Jarvis Landry, pay him over those guys because I know they're going anyway.
All right. I can understand that. Well, we're going to wrap things up pretty soon. We can about, we're going about an hour and 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and let's finally finish things up with the one thing that everybody likes to talk about more than anything else. Quarterbacks. Woo! Okay, here we go. I guess the easiest question right now is status of Ryan Tannehill in your minds. Ian?
I think that he is going to be 100% when he comes back. I am being very optimistic about Ryan. I think he is going to be a little bit rusty to start off with, but I think he's going to get right back to where he left off, which if we all remember, that last season in 2016, he was having a career year before he went and hurt his leg or before his knee came out and hurt him. So I am.
And he did make the playoffs. He made the playoffs. And all you people out there saying he never made the playoffs. Yes, he did.
I think out of all of the seasons, out of all of the quarterbacks that we've seen, for the last 10 or 15 years, I think he's the best one that we've had. Even better than Matt Moore, even better than Jay Cutler.
Chad Pennington?
I have beliefs. Chad Pennington, Chad Pennington was very serviceable for 1 year because he was very, very accurate. But I think the part that got Chad Pennington to the playoffs was a play called the Wildcat, if I remember correctly. So I don't think that was as much Chad Pennington as it was for the Wildcat. So I do think he's better than Chad Pennington. Chad was your Alex Smith quarterback that he'll give you your good 5 or 10 yards, but he didn't have too much going down the field after that because his arm was dead. If I remember right, that year. But I'm feeling really good. I'm really feeling really good about Tannehill. But here's what I will say: I think they have to get somebody young behind him. I think it can't be Brandon Doughty. I think it's got to be someone who they feel confident can step in for Tannehill if for some reason they do not re-sign him after his contract is up, or if Tannehill gets hurt again. And if that means picking up the best available quarterback in the first or second round, you know what? You're talking about somebody that can lead your team for 6 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road. It may be worth the gamble. That's my opinion. Different people have different opinions on it.
Speaking of opinions, Mr. Runabaum?
I'm absolutely with Ian on Tannehill. I think he's the best quarterback we've had since Marino. We've had some really bad ones. So I think Ryan Tannehill, I feel very confidently you can say prior to his injury, he was at worst in the middle of the league. Definitely was not a bad quarterback. He was at least decent. And so I think he was doing nothing but trending up. And so difficult it is to get a quarterback in the NFL and the length of time it takes for most of them to get ready. I'm on board with Tannehill, and that it's obvious to me Tannehill's the starter. And his contract, despite people throwing his contract out there, is a very favorable contract.
It's a very cheap contract. Here, I actually went down the list not that long ago. Sorry to cut you off like that, Chad, but it's like
it's okay.
Now we're in my territory, and I'm like I'm shook over everything. Just to now, I understand that it's only the guarantee that matters, but I need to just go ahead and do this really quick here. No, it's not Spock Track. Is that I want, or is it? Whatever. It's fine. So where is it? Go ahead and keep talking. I'm gonna find it. I'm looking for
what you'll see is I believe his contract's around $17 million a year, but he has very low percentage of his contract right now guaranteed. So again, you can't get quarterbacks like that. I mean, look what Kirk Cousins is going to make this year, and I don't think Kirk Cousins is better than Ryan Tannehill. So I think obviously the way to go is you keep Tannehill in there and you keep him in there as the man. I agree with Ian though. I feel it's a mistake to go out and just sign an old veteran now, because I like pairing. Really, at any position, I like having a good pairing of a young guy with a veteran guy. And so I think it was a good thing to have veteran quarterbacks with Ryan Tannehill in his earlier seasons. But now he's a veteran. He's 30. He's been in the league. He's started a lot of games. It's time to get a young quarterback in there with him. And it's an interesting draft. There's some really interesting prospects in this draft that you could throw in there with Ryan Tannehill. So I'm all for basically with what Ian said. I think Ryan Tannehill is a guy this year, and I also think you go out and you draft a guy. Again, not to harp on Jarvis Landry, but if you keep Jarvis Landry on your team, that keeps a hole filled up, and it makes it a lot easier to maybe go get a quarterback if you keep some players in place on your team. But I'm kind of torn in the first round versus second round. I think a name to keep an eye on is Mason Rudolph from Oklahoma State. I think he's a potential second round target that the Dolphins might go for, because they do have the luxury of getting a guy that has a live arm that's not NFL ready. So I don't know if Lamar Jackson will fall into the second round, but you can go out. If you're the Dolphins, you do have that luxury of being able to draft a quarterback that you're not relying to start on immediately. I think they'll be in a position to maybe get one in the second versus the first. But, all the Baker Mayfield love's been interesting on Twitter. There's been a lot of hype about Baker Mayfield wanting to come to the Dolphins, but he would have to be a pick that would fall into pick 11. And so I don't know if he'll last that long or if that's the right move for the Dolphins or not. Give up that spot. It'd be hard to pass on. Who's that Georgia linebacker, Roquan Smith? Am I saying his name right? The linebacker from Georgia. It'd be hard to pass on him if he's in there.
Right, and that's my biggest issue with this whole thing is that we want to draft a young quarterback and a first round quarterback. That's what most people are wanting. They don't want a quarterback that's going to develop. No. They want a first rounder. They want the guy who's going to come in and replace Tannehill, or even go as far as to suddenly become somebody who is so good right off the bat that Ryan Tannehill is going to become the backup in 2018. That's what people are wanting, and I'm just thinking to myself, you guys are really expecting a lot out of these rookie quarterbacks. And this is the thing that I'm thinking about while I'm doing this is that you guys know Brandon Howard, right?
Yep. Of
course.
Okay. So Brandon, he actually is pretty darn good at evaluating these guys. And I'm actually pretty shocked. Well, I shouldn't say I'm shocked. I'm surprised that he's been right so much. Like, he was the one who correctly predicted that Kiko Alonso was not going to do well at all outside. Everybody was saying, he'll be fine. Kiko's fine. He can do the outside. He used to do outside linebacker in Buffalo, and Brandon's just sitting here like, you guys are going to regret this. And I'm pretty sure we regret putting him outside, huh? What do you think, guys?
Turtle. He's a turtle.
Like he needs to be inside. We need to remove Lawrence Timmons and put Kiko back where he was actually good, and then we'll be okay. Raekwon can go outside. So you kind of have to use that. You kind of have to figure out who's best to go where, because we've already seen Kiko outside. It's not good. So he was right about that. And a lot of times when Brandon's evaluating guys, it turns out that he was right. He said Kenyon Drake needs to be the starting running back, and he needs to get a shot. And lo and behold, Kenyon Drake, as soon as he gets his shot, finally, it took forever. It took Damian Williams getting hurt for Drake to finally get a featured role. And lo and behold, now nobody misses Jay Ajayi because we got Kenyon Drake. So once again, Brandon is right. And now I'm looking at Brandon, and his tweets are showing me that none of the quarterbacks in this draft class right now are even as good as Deshaun Kaiser for Cleveland. But everybody wants Kaiser out, but that's a different story altogether. And I'm thinking to myself, none of these guys are even as good as Kaiser? Then why are we pushing so hard? Is it just because we desperately want a quarterback, somebody to replace Tannehill? Or is it because these guys are just actually that good? And I'm thinking to myself, if Brandon is saying that none of these guys are even as good as Kaiser as far as tools go, big of a deal.
It's a valid point
in the first round.
I think the Dolphins have no choice. They've got to get a quarterback, and so
they do have to get one. I do, but it's like, do we really need to use our 11th overall pick on a guy who's not even as good as Kaiser?
We hired 2 years ago. We hired Adam Gase. So my first point in contention is you've brought in a coach that has the reputation of being very good at developing quarterbacks. So in my mind, we should always have a young quarterback being developed, just taking advantage of Adam Gase being our coach. He should be developing a quarterback. What quarterback is? That's who I'm asking. If I'm Stephen Ross, I actually don't listen to Greer or Tannenbaum. I'm asking Adam Gase, who do you want as a quarterback? And he's at the Senior Bowl right now, Gase is.
And he hates it, apparently.
I'm relying on him, though, to decide if any of these are quarterbacks or ones he wants to develop. Me personally, there's only one thing I need from a quarterback, and he's got to have an arm that's capable of making all the throws well. And so I'm not big on getting guys who have had successful college career, or they seem like they have really good intangibles, but they just don't have that great of an arm, because it limits your playbook. So I think the top guys like Josh Allen and Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, the desperation right now in the league are going to make those three untouchable. You look at a team like the Arizona Cardinals or the New York Jets or the Denver Broncos would be another one on there, maybe the Buffalo Bills. Those teams are all desperately looking for a starting quarterback right now. So I think they're going to either use where they're at in the draft, or they're going to give ammunition to move up and target those guys that they expect to be ready to play. So I think for Miami, it comes down to, are you going to use the 11th overall pick on a guy like maybe Baker Mayfield? And I don't know. I honestly don't think Baker Mayfield would be able to come in and just run the offense as is. I think you'd have to change the offense a little bit for his skill set, because he's little, and I don't know if he can just be a drop-back quarterback and succeed in the NFL. He's a guy that you want to kind of have moving around the pocket a lot, you almost want to put him in a situation where you want things to break down so he can use his intangibles to make plays happen. But I don't know that I could justify taking the 11th overall pick on Baker Mayfield if he's not going to be able to run the offense you have in place, if you've got to change the offense for him. But that's obviously just a thought. He was electric in college, and if he's special, your hope is for the Dolphins that they're not in this position where you have shots at these high-rated quarterbacks, because we're more in the playoffs. And so I think when you get the chance, and you've said this, I think yourself, Lewis, is when you can get a quarterback, you get a quarterback. You got to grab them. So if Adam Gase really likes what he sees out of one of these guys, I have no problem with them using the 11th overall pick and getting them in here, because if they're good, even if they're not amazing, but they just look good in limited play, I think the Patriots have shown time and time again, you can develop a guy, and in 4 or 5 years, if Ryan Tannehill has a really good next 4 years and he's 34 and you want to keep Tannehill for another 4 years, we'll probably get the majority of that draft capital back if you want to trade the guy you drafted off and bring in another guy for Gase to develop, if that's what you want to do. But I don't think you can go past round 2 in this draft and not grab a quarterback. If you're bringing one in that can legitimately be developed to start, I think if you start going into the middle rounds again, I don't see it being very helpful to bring in another Brandon Doughty, because if you don't have any guy that has the talent to actually be the starter, I don't know what you're doing. We'll see. I'm right now 50-50 if the Dolphins are targeting a quarterback or not that's in the draft. I hope they are, but it wouldn't shock me with the ones that are coming available in free agency, that they'll just go get one in free agency. But I'm hopeful. I don't know. I'm kind of curious of your opinion. I'm kind of rambling on the different quarterbacks, but do you guys have a guy in the draft right now that you're really wanting to see the Dolphins go after?
We're gonna have to, Chad. We're gonna have to talk about that next week, because it's like we're trying to squeeze in every topic under the book in one show. It's like we're not gonna be able to do it. We're gonna have to talk more about the quarterbacks in the next show.
That's fine. That's fine.
Real quick, guys. Real quick. Final thoughts. Ian, go.
Final thoughts. 2017 was definitely a disappointment, but you know what's great about 2017 being done is that 2018 is now starting. I, like every year, look forward to the upcoming Miami Dolphins season. I am hopeful that we have the right team that can take us to the playoffs and hopefully get us to a Super Bowl at some point. And I'm just appreciative that you guys are putting this live stream together and that you invited me to be a part of it. So that's those are my final thoughts.
Well, just make sure you come back again, okay? You hear?
Whenever you invite me, I'll be back, Lewis. I promise.
All right. Now, Chad, final thoughts?
Glad 2017 is gone. I wouldn't get too down. Optimistic. I think Adam Gase is the guy for the job. I think he's brought in definitely some upgrades as the assistant coaches, and Ryan Tannehill will be back next year. So even at this point, without any personnel moves, the team looks like it's going to be significantly better than last year from a leadership standpoint. So looking forward to 2018.
Well, here's my final thoughts. I am like everybody else. I am so glad the nightmare is over. 2017 is gone. Jay Cutler will be gone. All of these horrible, horrible, horrible memories probably won't be gone. I'm probably going to remember this for the rest of my Dolphins loving life, and I'll get over it. I'll get over it eventually. But anyway, so I am, unlike many others, I am actually optimistic for next year. And like I wrote a column just earlier this evening, and yes, this is a bit of a shameless plug here. I did write a column basically detailing exactly why there is reason to be optimistic, and it is that this team does have talent. It's not like the talent does not exist, because we have guys like Kenyon Drake, and I don't know if he can do the whole workhorse thing. That's why we need to get another one, and I'm sure we will. There's probably a veteran back out there where we can get cheap, a la Chris Ivory or something like that, that we can pick up and he can be the backup guy, or maybe we bring back Damian Williams, I don't know, or maybe Sonoris Perry does a good job. If we can block for them, pretty much any running back can do. But Drake knows what he's doing as far as being a running back goes, and he's actually more versatile than Ajayi because he can actually catch the football and be a receiver too. So I'm good at that front. Wide receiver, this is one thing I didn't get to talk about real quick because we didn't have time, and I still don't have time, but I think Parker could be a big slot guy, and then we can kind of see if we can move somebody else outside, and we'll try to experiment with that if Landry does go. I don't want him to go, but if that does happen, I think Parker would actually be better suited in the slot because he's not a number one receiver. We've already seen that he can't really do what we want him to do. So if we put Parker in the slot, he can be like a big slot guy. He can make high catches without actually having to leap up over cornerbacks. He can just kind of high point the ball and make it so that the linebackers and safeties that would be on him in the middle of the field can't actually get to the ball. That I would be okay with. And the other thing is that basically, look, Adam Gase is not an idiot. People are trying to get Gase fired all because we went 6-10. It's like, you guys forget we went 10-6 to the playoffs. We went to the playoffs the first time in 8 years last season under Adam Gase and mostly Ryan Tannehill. And yes, Ajayi was a big part of that too, but you know what? It's still Ryan Tannehill. And what was the biggest difference on the offense between 2016 and 2017? It was who was quarterback. It was Ryan Tannehill versus Jay Cutler. You can't dismiss that. And now if Ryan Tannehill comes back, which I believe he will, I think he's going to be fine. He's been rehabbing for a long time. He's going to be A-okay. ACLs are not as big a deal as they used to be in this league. I thought that not getting surgery would not be a bad thing, but I turned out I was wrong, and so now he's got the surgery, he's rehabbed, he's not going to be rushing back or anything. He's had a whole year to get better, and he's going to have even more time. He's going to have more time than most people have for ACL recoveries, actually, so I think he's going to be okay on that front. So there is room for optimism. And these guys who we're drafting, like, for instance, like you guys, we have Jakeem Grant, who is a weapon on the offense. You have guys like Kenyon Drake. You have guys like, I'm just trying to think of another one off the bat. Laramie Tunsil. He's had a sort of a slow start, but I think he'll eventually wake up and get better. And then you have like Devon Godshaw, Vincent Taylor, Cordray Tankersley, and all these guys are flashing and showing what they can do and what they have to offer. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. Nobody's shown up as a star. Nobody has become Jalen Ramsey overnight, like the Jaguars pretty much got lucky with when they drafted him. But he was a first-round draft pick. And Miles Jack...
very, very high first-round draft pick. Yeah.
Yes, and Miles Jack was a first-rounder who was drafted in the second round because of injury concerns. So the Jaguars got really, really good players, and that's actually as a result of them being miserably bad for 5 years. So the Jaguars finally got their due, so hooray. But the past 2 drafts for the Dolphins have not been bad. They really haven't. Nobody's shown up to be a superstar like we were wanting, but maybe given time, they will eventually snap out of it. There's very rarely instances where you draft a guy and they're suddenly the best player in the NFL and they stay that way. That's the key. Do they stay that way? Because we've had a lot of good players who have shown up and become superstars and then suddenly fallen off the map. That's happened to us more than once. And that just means that extreme circumstances led to that player being shown up as a highlight reel, and then they just suddenly kind of disappear on you. So that's kind of something we have to think about. I would rather have a lot of solid, good players than a great player who's great 1 year, and then as soon as you sign them to a long-term deal, they kind of disappear. That's kind of the thing you don't want to run into. Like for instance, Kiko Alonso. I guess I don't want to use him as an example because I like Kiko in the middle. I gotta have to provide so in the middle. I like Kiko in the middle, but we signed him for a lot of money, and now we're kind of stuck with him, and we put him in a position where he can't succeed. Like we tried to make Kiko something he's not. He is not a coverage linebacker. I don't think he ever was. So now, if we can put him back in the middle, I think we'll kind of get our money's worth. But as of right now, we kind of banked on Kiko being the same guy, and then we moved him from being the same guy to being somebody else. So that's a mistake of coaching. But it can be fixed, because Kiko is still the same guy he was in 2016. He's just in the wrong role. So there's reason for optimism. There really is. You have Xavier Howard still. You have Cordray Tankersley, who's also developing. So we have ourselves a nice little cornerback duo that we can work with. And you still have Rashad Jones, who's really good. You have TJ McDonald. He's kind of more of a strong safety. It was actually Travis Wingfield on Twitter who mentioned that, why don't we do what the Patriots do a lot and go with a 3-safety backfield? And I'm thinking to myself, that's not a bad idea. Why not? Why don't we copy what the other good teams do? Why don't we copy?
Just to interject there, that was even mentioned, I think you are going to see some of that from the Dolphins. I think the idea of a coverage linebacker is becoming more and more extinct in the NFL because most teams run 3 wide receivers, and the tight ends are just getting more and more athletic. And so there's very few linebackers in the league. There's some, but it's not easy to get linebackers athletic enough to consistently cover. Usually you're just hoping that you drop them into coverage from time to time and the offense doesn't catch it. But I think you're going to see a lot of Rashad Jones and maybe TJ McDonald being the guy that's covering the guy that Kiko might have been trying to cover this year.
And I'd be okay with that. Let's put 3 safeties out there. Let's put TJ and Rashad in the same box and then let a free safety who's somebody else we're going to have to pick up and let him roam the center field. Because Rashad and TJ are not coverage safeties. Again, it's like coverage again. We're not built for coverage. We're built to slam it down your throats. Rashad is awesome in the box, but put him in coverage and he's kind of a weak spot. The same goes for TJ McDonald. They're strong safeties. They're not built for that.
Depending on what you're asking. I mean, I think Rashad very good roaming, but you don't want to put him man-to-man coverage a lot in the game. I'd agree with that. But, both TJ McDonald and Rashad tackle really well, so I think you will see them. I think they give you the skill set you can pull the linebacker off and run 3 safeties that you're suggesting. We have the capability there with those 2 guys.
So I'm going to say one more time, there is reason for optimism. We just have to keep moving forward, keep building a core of good players. Devon Godshaw is a good player. Vincent Taylor is a good player. We've seen what they can do. We just need to keep putting them out there. Xavier Howard is a good player. Cordray Tankersley can be a good player. Kenyon Drake is a very good player, and he might even be great if we give him the ball more and we can see what else he can do. Laramie Tunsil has potential to be a very good player. That's why he was drafted so highly, and the only reason we fell, as far as we know, was the whole the scandal where somebody released it on his Twitter feed. And, of course, you have the likes of, like, who else can I use up here? Jakeem Grant. He's also a very dangerous weapon when he gets the ball in his hands. We need to find a way to use him more. And I'm going to say this also. Ryan Tannehill is actually entering his prime. Yes, he's going to be 30. But you know what? Most quarterbacks in this league nowadays, they don't show up until they hit 30. Like, you see all these quarterbacks who are like struggling early on, and maybe they do really well, but they don't really mature until they hit 30. Quarterback and kickers are the only positions in the league where you can afford to be 35, 36, 37 years old and still keep playing for another 6 years. Ask Tom Brady, who's 41. No other position in the league has guys who are that old. Like, I think the oldest guy besides Brady at this point is, like, just off the top of my head, is like James Harrison, who also now is in New England, and he's 38. And I can't imagine he's going to be around much longer.
Yeah, so, I agree. No, Drew Brees is a perfect example there, Lewis. I don't remember Drew Brees being that good on San Diego, but then he got to New Orleans after getting those years in. He was really, really special. So
right, it took him a while to become Drew Brees. He was not, and even when we were trying to sign him, he still wasn't Drew Brees. You know, he was like, oh, Drew Brees, he's a good quarterback, but he wasn't future Hall of Fame quarterback Drew Brees.
No. And there's several cases. Once in a while you'll get a special player, but it takes several years in the NFL anymore to get your quarterbacks developed and at the level you want them playing at. So that's to me is case in point why it'd be crazy to get rid of Tannehill and just throw a rookie in there. To me, you're asking for another 2 or 3 years of development time before you're going to be able to compete again. And so for the majority of rookies, so I agree with you. Tannehill's in his prime. You know, let's see if all these years we've invested in development will pay off.
Okay, we need to go. My final thoughts have run way too long. Okay, so thank you all so much for joining us. Next week, we're going to try and get in some more quarterback talk. I know we didn't get to talk much about like the guys who are actually out there, Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Lamar Jackson, who's nobody's talking about for some reason. And we'll try to get more into that next time, and we'll talk about whatever other news is going on. Maybe by then we'll have an idea of what's actually going to happen with Jarvis. It's kind of up and down there. So we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you all for joining us as we kick off our podcasts once again. Next week we will be doing some more, and I hope you will join us then too. So from all of us at PhinManiacs, myself, Chad Ronnebaum, and Ian Berger, we will see you all next week for another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast.